As it was mentioned, I'm Alan Lizarraga. I am part of the Border Network for Human Rights. We're a nonprofit organization here in El Paso, Texas. We have over 26 years of working for the community. This November is going to be 27 years. Uh, we are a membership organization here in El Paso. We are a human rights organization that does immigration advocacy, but again, with that human rights framework. Um, let's see. And again, we are a membership organization. We have close to 7,000 individuals that are organized under BNHR, around 1,000 families. And again, as our primary work is here in El Paso, but we have been able to expand to new regions. So we now have human rights centers in Del Rio, in Eagle Pass, in Presidio, Texas. And tomorrow, actually, we're going to open our new human rights center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So we're very, very proud of the expansion that we have been able to do. We're proud to be serving more families along our region now. And to tell you a little bit about the work that I do or that we do, we facilitate the education and organizing of border and immigrant communities. Basically, what we do is we go out in the community and we talk to people about their rights. What rights do they have in this country? What rights do they have as human beings? And right now in this political, climate, you can imagine why that's so important. Making sure that all members of our community know that they have certain rights under our constitution that have to be respected. So that's the work that we've been doing for 26 years. Again, we believe that by providing this education to our communities, that they're gonna feel empowered to take on the task of creating change, of advocating for policies, for structures, for systems that benefit them, that uplift their shared humanity. Our overall goal, is for all of us to be seen with equal dignity and rights, regardless of our status, regardless of our skin color, of where we come from, how we look. We all want to be seen as human beings with equal dignity and rights, especially before the law. Um, Again, as I mentioned, we've been working really hardly here in El Paso for over 26 years. We have around 7 regions. Each region is organizes its own human rights committees, which is where people come in and have those conversations on a weekly basis. Currently, we have more than 36 committees here in El Paso. And I want to say one committee is 10 families, so you can imagine a little more how extensive the work is. I like to show always this quote from our executive director that kind of highlights the nature of our work. So we work in various, I want to say levels or structures. We work at the local, at the state, at the national. Recently, we've been able to work at the international level as well. So this work is comprehensive. It's complex. We know that here in the borderlands, there's not just one system impacting us. It's usually all levels of government that are impacting us, especially right now. As it was mentioned in my introduction, I primarily do communications for the organization. So one of my key role is making sure that I am working to produce a border narrative, a narrative that truly describes the experiences that we have been living here at the border, that challenges the narratives that are currently coming out of the federal government, the state government, and even sometimes our local government. Because we believe that whatever happens here at the border is going to dictate the character of our nation as a whole. And that's very important because throughout history, and we're going to learn a little more about the history of the border as well, we have used the border as a place to trade off other communities, so trade off certain segments of our population. And that has led us to where we are today. So it's very important, and I think, I share this with you all, that we recognize the importance of the border for the cultural benefits that it gives us, the economic benefits that it gives us, and just understanding that The border is a unique place. It should be a place that should be celebrated instead of a place that should be criminalized, militarized, and with all this. So we really try to draw upon images, symbolism, historical context of what America represents. We have the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island. We have those depictions that show us the character of America, a nation that was built by immigrants, a nation that was once proud to say that it was built by immigrants, that it welcomed immigrants. And we're working to make sure that we take our communities there, to make sure that we understand, this place where we are. Um, with that, again, I have 4 goals that I want to accomplish with you all today. Again, I want to dive a little more into those border narratives. I want to do a quick activity with all of you. And then I want to jump in to make that connection between the narratives and the history of our border and immigration policy. I think it's very important for all of us to as well know a little bit of how we got here. And I have a couple of key slides to share with you all. I also want to dive in a little bit into us understanding the root causes of migration. Why are people coming here? Why is this happening? Or why has it happened through our country's history? And lastly, I want to share a little bit about the impacts of these strategies that are happening here in our community. Most of you are probably aware with what's causing and who it is impacting, but kind of a moment of reflection for all of us to really ground this learning. But before I begin, any questions on BNHR or a little bit of the work that we do? All right. So first, again, I want to dive into narratives of the border, and I want us to work together to create what I call a word cloud. So I want us to share a little bit, maybe just share as a group, what words come to mind when you think about the U.S.-Mexico border? At the top of your head, it could be celebration, dangerous, injustice, river, vibrant. What was that? Walls.
Armed officers.
Suffering.
Fluid.
Fluid. Great. Great. Texas. What about impatient? Is that a word that comes to your mind when you think of the border?
No.
Military.
What about chaos? Chaos?
Yes.
Chaos? Does that come to mind? Hospitality? Welcoming. Okay, so I think for some of us, the version that we have of the border is it's rooted in our values. Um, um, I wanted to kind of play with what do you think of the word invasion? Because if you were to talk to someone that is not from El Paso, near El Paso, has been to El Paso, that's probably what they think that it's happening in our border, an invasion. That's what the governor has spent 4 years saying, that there's an invasion happening in our border. That's what the Trump administration is saying right now, that there is an invasion happening, that there are dangerous criminals flowing through our border, that are bringing in drugs, that are killing people. But us that are here in this very meaningful space know that that's not true. So first, I want to say that the words that we shared and the words that are being spread, they weren't created in a vacuum. It wasn't something that someone just pulled out of a bag one day and said, you know what, today I want to say that there's an invasion happening. There is a history that has shaped that language, a history that has shaped this narrative, and that has led us to the place where we are today. So with that, I want to dive into the history of a border. And I have 3 specific timelines or brackets we created. So the first one is from 1924 to 1980. and we categorize this as the border control kind of era. So this was a time, when there was no wall, restriction of flow people was very rare. My grandma used to tell me this story that back then she would pay $1 to cross the bridge, to cross through the river. They used to have like this inflatables and they would literally just, push them through. She would come and shop and she would go back. And that was usually the interaction here happening in our region. So there was no need for people, to pay a coyote. There was no need for people to have a visa. They would simply come, do whatever they needed to do, shop around, come visit someone, and they would go back to their country. But then we had the establishment of the U.S. Border Patrol in 1924. And this was part of the Labor Appropriation Act. And it's important to know that immigration back then used to be under the Department of Labor. So it wasn't a criminal thing. It was mostly about regulating, the flow of people for labor, making sure that, that there was some type of structure generally. When the Border Patrol was established, there was a total of 450 agents. Of course, this number continued to grow throughout the years. But can you imagine 450? How many, does anyone know around how many we have right now it's thousands of officers now. So from 450 to the amount that we have, it's crazy. And again, I don't want to dive too much into the history of the U.S. Border Patrol because they do have a history that it's worth knowing. But most of the early recruits of the Border Patrol come from Texas Rangers, and we know that Texas Rangers have a deep history of racism. The practices that they were doing were not okay. But for the purpose of this, I want to center this idea that this is when we started thinking of we needed to control who and why people are coming to our border, who is crossing and why are they crossing. And again, this was like the initial setup of that system. Let me just. Yeah. Okay. So again, it was less about closing or sealing the border, and it was more about who crossed, who was coming, and why. And then we had the Immigration Act of 1924, right? So this is when things start getting a little more, I like to say this is when it gets sketchy. So we started, our government established a quota system. So it restricted the immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe and Asia. So again, we were starting to add that racial element to our system of who can come, how do they look, why are they coming here? We started infusing that racial bias into the immigration system. Mind you, before this, there was already a couple of things that happened. But again, the point of presenting this is to understand that this became now a highly restrictive and discriminatory structure that was primarily fueled by nativism and eugenics. So this was during the prime time of the nativist kind of movement, making sure that the population had the right kind of people to build a society that they deemed certain characteristics are desirable. So this was infused into our system. And this stayed on until about 1965, where this quota remained in place. And then throughout this time of, again, border control, we started seeing how economic fears and scapegoating started playing a role in the way that we manage our border. So Mexican migration had begun to increase during the 1920s, and it was mostly because the the United States needed workers. They needed people to come in and do labor. So people were coming in, again, it wasn't a big deal back then. They would come to work, they would go back when it was finished. But then we had the Great Depression. And what happens when there's an economic downturn? Jobs start, there's less jobs available. what happens? People get anxious. People start having this fear, how am I gonna make a living? How is it possible that this person has a job but I don't? So this was a way, again, for this system to start going after certain populations, and they went after Mexican migrants. They launched several deportation operations. The first one that we've seen, it deported around 2 million Mexicans and Mexican Americans because there were US and citizens that were included in the mix. But again, it was all rooted under this perception that they were what? Taking away jobs from people that belong here. We continue to see this, especially with the Bracero program, which was launched during World War II. And again, it was because the US needed that labor. So there's this pattern throughout history that the US will take when they need, and once they don't need them, they will push them out. So again, the Bracero program, and this one is very interesting because it kind of encouraged legal and unauthorized migration at the same point. So again, the US was still trying to find a way to control its borders. They were, I want to say, like testing programs and launching things. But as we went throughout history, it started to become really clear that it was a system that was infused with racial bias. It needed to be discriminatory, it needed to have certain limits, it had to restrict who was the person coming in and what they looked like. Any questions on any of this before? I know I kind of go fast, but are we all good? All right. So again, as soldiers started coming back after World War II, migration started to become, an issue that people were paying attention to. It started again to crack down certain, especially the Mexican nationals here at the border that started to ramp up. And again, even as this Bracero program continued to attract people for the labor that the US needed, the Border Patrol started to implement this military style roundup. So we started to see this switch in the way that things were going, this switch in the way that enforcement was taking place. And that leads us to the period that we call border security. So from 1982 to the 2000s, this is what we call the period of border security. And it's going to be super easy to understand this one, and it all begins with the war on drugs, right? So this was a period, again, where we saw this shift on the focus from border control to immigration, from border control of immigration to drug trafficking, this switch in the way that we were thinking of things. So the Reagan administration did very well in making this link between illegal immigration and drug trafficking. They somehow got the American people to believe there was a linkage between the two. So what this meant was that basically now anyone that was coming from the southern border could be a potential drug dealer, a drug trafficker, and that needed to be, something that the U.S. invested in. That needed to be something that the U.S. Started working towards finding a solution. So again, this linkage really allowed for more funding for the Border Patrol, but it also allowed for this new militarization of our border. So this is when we first started seeing those systems. So again, we started seeing this prevention through deterrence. Has anyone heard this phrase before? So we're going to prevent people from coming in by making it harder. That was the sole purpose. And we saw certain operations, like here in El Paso, Operation Hold the Line, Operation Gatekeeper, Operation Safeguard. So this were meant to dissuade people from coming by making it harder. And all they did was basically drive migrants and people that wanted to come to our country to isolated areas, to remote places that are dangerous. And what has this caused? And we see the impacts very clearly in our society nowadays. This has started to increase migrant deaths. People were dying in the deserts, people were dying in rivers, Bodies were being found. And again, it was under this thought that if we make it harder, people are not gonna come. People are just gonna see that it's too hard, they're gonna go back. That's not the case. And we're gonna talk a little more about why that's not the case. But again, this is where that kind of distorted policy started coming into our system. And then we have criminalization. So the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act of 1986, the last comprehensive immigration reform we have seen. So it gave amnesty to some, but it's punished others. So this is where we see are the immigration system finally taking this criminal turn. So now nonviolent offenses, which could include drug charges, could make a person deportable. We started seeing the criminalization of unauthorized labor. We started seeing the deployment of this military style tactics at the border. So again, we went from controlling who was coming in, why they were coming in, to this border security lens of we needed to make sure that we're paying attention to what's crossing, who's crossing. But we implemented again militarization to the mix. We added criminalization. And yes, this law did give amnesty to some, but again, the consequences that we experience now come mostly from this belief that we needed to militarize and criminalize people that were coming to our border. And now that leads us to national security. So again, we took a whole spin we went from border security now to national security. And it's very simple. What happened in 2001? 9/11. So again, this obviously it was a time that changed everything. Everything around us changed. I was too young to be a part of the change. But what I do know was that there was this fear in American society. You know, there was this anxiousness of who's coming in, what are their intentions. So we started transforming this idea that now the border was a place where, the security of our nation was at risk. Where people that wanted to come or the people that were coming in, they needed to be vetted. There needed to be this mechanism to be able to keep the bad ones out, the good ones in. But again, it all comes from the experiences that our country faced on 9/11. Another big thing is that this is when the Department of Homeland Security was established. So this consolidated a lot of the agencies that are operating in our border and in our nation. And this also switched now. Again, as I mentioned, immigration used to be under a labor kind of system. It switched it over now to like a criminal judicial system that we see nowadays. So now, we have a border wall. We have people that are, away from each other. We have families that are being torn apart by this system that fails to recognize their humanity, that fails to recognize the various elements impacting the decision to come to the US. And we have failed operations that throughout history, as I pointed out, have failed to lower the amount of people that are crossing to really do an impactful change to our system. So this picture is very important to me. It's important to me because I refuse to accept that this is the way America should be portrayed to the rest of the world. This is, again, unacceptable that we have a mother with a child being asked to go under barbed wire under the illusion that more barbed wire, more soldiers, more walls, more fences, that they're gonna do something to fix a system that is clearly broken, a system that was funded on horrible practices, on a horrible history of discrimination, of racism, and obviously with a failed narrative and a failed understanding of why people are coming here. So with that, again, I want to dive a little more into the reasons why people come here. So the most simple one is economic reasons. So people need to come here to find a better job. They need to sustain their families, and they see the United States as that place where that could be given to them. The second one is violence. So, especially in Mexico, as someone who, I was, born here, but I was raised in Juarez. The violence that was experienced when I was younger was real. There were shootings happening one happened in front of my school, in front of my house. There was this sense of being in an unsafe place. So again, this is just an example, but violence does drive people to obviously seek a better life, to seek the protection that they deserve, the protection for their families. Number three is political persecution. So again, we've seen this lately. Some governments have been persecuting individuals. We see this, in Venezuela, which has been driving people to come to the United States. This is also one of the categories, that makes people eligible to seek asylum in this country, or that we would think it would. It used to be. But again, the political persecution is actually a big element in what of the drive in migration. Four is family reunification. So people wanting to be with their loved ones. And that shouldn't be something that takes us, takes a village to understand. I talked about last time how, back then they would send, the oldest brother to the US to come and to go work in the United States, to send money. Once they felt like they were in a good place, they would go back, or, something would happen. But it was mostly, one individual. Obviously, throughout time, as our system started to change, obviously it gets harder for people to go back and come back. So a lot of people, stayed here, and they started creating a future, or maybe, they were under this sense that one day they will all be together. Obviously that has again become harder. We see now in our communities how families are broken. Some are here, some are there. They can't see each other. There's no way of someone, if they can't to go and visit. So there's need, and it's a human need to be together, to be with your loved ones, for mothers to see their children grow up, for parents to be, together. So we do see this as also a factor driving migration. And the last one, this one is fairly new. I think all of us are trying to understand how climate change has also played a big role in driving migration. So we definitely have seen this one as well throughout this past few years. How people, their crops, are being ruined by these disasters. Their homes are impacted by natural disasters, or some type of situation. And to them, coming to the US is the best and the safest path towards our future. So again, these are just some reflection on the reason why people come here. I'm not saying that everyone fits into these categories. There are a variety of things that sometimes force people to come to the US. But again, it's very important to recognize them and to understand that none of this was thought about or really put into context when creating this immigration apparatus that we have today, especially nowadays. This is not something that is being looked up and analyzed with the caution that it deserves, with the humanity it deserves. Instead, it has been polarized. It's a polarized issue when it really shouldn't be. Any questions before I jump into the impacts of this? Yes.
That Immigration Reform Act of 1996, do you have a sense of what was happening then that would have been the major motivation for that?
Again, the war on drugs was a big role on this. Obviously, and back then President Reagan recognized the contributions of immigrants. He recognized that people had been here building their families. But I do want to say that there was this sense that there needed to be more resources put at the border. So I think it also came as a time of, political compromise. So if you give us this for this, And I think that's how we got this system that we have.
Get certain things in place.
I think so. I think there was, it was a lot easier to kind of maneuver the political play. I know for many of us that have been doing this work, finding that segment of compromise, or where do we give in for another, it has become hard. And I think, this, it's a good thing to look at of how it came around. Um, but at least for us, and especially for me, as I continue learning more about how and the various systems, what is that compromise? How far are we willing to go? Are we going to lend in for more enforcement, for more militarization, for the legalization of some? Or are we gonna, sit down and really again think about all these things that are happening to really put something forward? So again, we have seen this trade-offs along our history. Saying, give us more money for enforcement and we'll solve a legal status for dreamers. Dreamers are only a section of this enormous population that we have that is just as deserving of being safe in this country. So again, that's a reflection, what is it that we're willing to sacrifice, and what's that impact gonna cost? Because again, it might not impact the rest of the country, but it's gonna impact us directly here at the border, some way or another. And later on, the systems that are being used here at the border will be used in the interior of the country. And we're seeing that right now. Again, the way that they're treating communities in the interior, that enforcement is happening, is the way that enforcement has happened in our communities for decades. The same kind of mechanisms, the same narrative, the same rhetoric. Now they're using it against other communities deep in the US. That doesn't make it right. Don't think I'm advocating for that. But again, it's because the rest of the country at some point has, compromised or in a way betrayed communities along the border under this belief that it was just for the border. When in reality, again, it's defining the character of our whole nation.
First, thank you for putting climate change in there. I think sometimes we forget that. That's really helpful. I just came back from 4 years in Honduras, and what was striking is the older men who had come to the States, had a period of time where they came and worked, made some money and went back and are staying with their families. They were able to build maybe a better house and buy some more property or whatever. But the family is intact, usually doing well. Now the young men go and, women in the parish, some of their husbands have been in the United States 9 or 10 years. So the effect on the families on both sides of the border, particularly in Honduras or wherever, you find yourself, these kids really going up without a father because there's no possibility of that kind of movement. Sociologically, I think it's going to have a strong impact on family life in a lot of these countries. The dads are just not coming back, and so there's enough money for the family, but we know that that's not enough. That was striking because the older men seem to have gone and come back, and now the younger guys.
Yeah, and again, that's not the way that back then it used to be. They would come and work for some time, save enough money, again, to maybe build their houses for whatever, and they would go back. That's the way it used to be. And as it was mentioned, we're destroying family structures. We're destroying the very foundation of society. And again, our organization is not religious. I am raised Catholic. I think family is one of the most important values that was bestowed upon me by my parents. So to see a country tearing that apart, and for some of us to be mad about it, for some of us to be, it's the way it is, it's really shocking to me. Because I would think, as a country that has these values in our history and in our society, we should defend families. We should defend the right for people to be together. For kids to not grow up without their parents. And going a little bit into the impacts, again, we see this violation this immense violations of human rights. Not just in the separation of people, but in the way that human beings are being treated at our border. Um, we see violation of civil rights. We've seen this, the right to claim asylum, the right to have a due process before the law. All that has kind of been eroded to throughout time. And again, this detention and criminalization, the belief that this is the only way we could solve things, it's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong, and it's not leading us anywhere. What it's doing is that it's filling the pockets of those jails that are privately operated. They're soaring right now. They're in cloud nine. So it's very important again, who is this really benefited and for what? So criminalization and detention are not a solution to what's happening in our border. I want to show you all this video. So a little bit of background.
I'm just gonna share the
Yeah.
video with the Zoom people.
Again, our focus really is, and it has been to humanize the experience of migration, to humanize people that are in our border, to make sure that the rest of the country sees what's happening, through through a lens that speaks about the truth. So each year we have this event. You probably have heard of it. It's called Hugs Not Walls. Has anyone heard of it? Great. Hugs, not walks.
Ellen, there are some people who are not from the.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So Hugs Not Walls is an event that we've been organizing for the past. It was born in 2016. So it's been a couple of years. But it was born out of this need for families again to be together, but most importantly to show the country who it's really been impacted by this system. So each year we try at least once a year to have it. We work with federal, state, local agencies to bring families together in the middle of the river. So we build a platform and we have families from Mexico and from the US come together in the middle and see each other for 3 minutes.
Tried so many times.
It's a really tough event. It's hard logistically, it takes a lot from us. It's expensive, it's extremely expensive. It takes a toll on us. It has taken a toll on me, honestly. Having to hear and see it's just so much different. But again, let's watch this video and I'll talk a little more about what it means. I think you might just have to.
To go to the presentation.
While we cast stones, volley with laws and policy, slander and polarize things that shouldn't be divided. People must live in hopeless spaces of longing and wait. We have forgotten because many of us don't see the everyday cuts that those lingering must endure. How do we refocus our attention and scope of our understanding? We must look to those most affected, those whose lives have been rearranged not by their free will, but our understanding and opinions. So it is our responsibility to first witness the harms of our ideas before progressing forward. Only then can we understand the pain and the things that should transcend all of our rhetoric and impatience. Gathered on the border, families come together to remember the ones they have lost to the border crisis and celebrate the family they still have. Unable to physically be next to each other due to immigration laws, these families come together for a 3-minute hug before letting go of each other and stepping back into the uncertainty of our system, unsure of when they will be able to hold each other again. In the perilous fight to survive, sacrifice is all too familiar, stinging those who we most neglect, reminding us the power of an embrace is nothing to be taken for granted. It is human. Mothers deserve and need to hug their children. Fathers gain strength from the embrace of their family. Grandparents should have the right to see their families grow old with them. Friends should be able to laugh, enjoying one another's presence. It is everyone's right to embrace the casual beauty of being with one another. So it is our fight, not to let our nation's struggles make us inhumane. It is our fight to remember the small things that shouldn't be denied. It is our fight to speak and witness their fight, their pain, in an effort to inspire change and decency, even in our most contentious hour. So I ask you to bear witness, to feel what you see here, not as a citizen of the US, but as a part of the whole, and conspire with me and others who work relentlessly to make what should be expected normal again. As families are forced to separate, they are cast back into real life, not whole, but torn, longing for what many of us can have, a home not made of brick and mortar, but of heart and mind. Instead, a void, an absence is what they leave, constantly desperate to return to what is theirs.
So that's not walls. Um. I'm sorry for making you cry. Again, for us, this is an act of love, but it's also an act of protest. Again, showing the rest of the country what's happening in our communities. And I don't know what you saw, it wasn't drug dealers, it wasn't criminals, it was families, it was children, it was people that deserve to be with each other. So I can tell you, having done I believe 3 of these events, each time, hearing the stories of families, some that haven't been able to see each other for decades. And when I say decades, I mean some for 20 years. Some for 5, some for 2. But this is the only way they have to see each other. And families, now in our community, they live around this event. They live around the possibility that, Hugs and Loss is gonna happen again. I'm gonna see my loved ones. I had instances where the family would call me and tell me, thank you so much. That was the last time I saw my dad before he passed away.
Mm.
So you can imagine what the toll is. I mean, it's terrible to know that. Um, but again, we do this because it's important. We do this because it's needed. Unfortunately, this year and for the foreseeable future, we will not be having any more hugs now. It has become, unsafe to have families partake in this event. There is no willingness in the federal government to support us in this as they have in the past, because this is an event that we work with Border Patrol with. Border Patrol is, it's a couple of, it's over there, but they're there. And they understand the purpose of this event and they have been, um, you know, partners in putting this together. But unfortunately, this administration, priorities change, and that's for them to understand. But yes.
Excuse me, did you say that is in El Paso or
Mhm.
is that another one?
Yeah, this is here in El Paso. This is the only, place where this has ever taken place. No other region has seen something like this. And again, we try to reunite 300 families per year. We've done this 11 times. So we have reunited a good amount of people. Obviously, it's for 3 minutes and I say 3 minutes, but it's not like we're counting 3 minutes. It's 3, 5, 6 minutes. But because people have, this need and each year, it becomes more and more and more. We also have limitations to what we can do. As I mentioned, it's hard to put this event together already, having this mindset of 300 families. And I can tell you there are many families that we have to, tell them, you know what, this year we're not able to, next year. The amount of people that need that need to partake in this event, it grows every year more and more and more. So it's not sustainable for us to keep also, having this event. And at the end of the day, this is not a solution. I don't want you to go and think that, we need to have hugs on walls all around the country. No, what the solution is to be is from our federal government in providing these families a comprehensive pathway for them to be with each other. Um, and that's another discussion that, we can have another time of what are those solutions. But I did want to show you this and really get my message of who really is being impacted. Really quick, some solutions that we have been calling for is to expand humanitarian assistance along the border regions. So for us, it's really important that instead of wasting all this money on walls, on military, on barbed wire, that we instead build welcoming centers along the border. So places where individuals can receive legal assistance, medical assistance if they need it, to really understand what the process is gonna be, to be welcome with dignity, with humanity, and really navigate it towards the process that they're about to partake. Some midterm solutions, the comprehensive legalization of immigration flow. So making sure that we have immigration and asylum reform in our country. And restoring the rights of migrants and border residents. So no longer seeing and using the border as a place of exemption for human rights or for constitutional rights, but as a place where they must be respected, they must be honored, and they must be followed throughout the various agencies that we operate with. And long term, obviously, we all, as a country, and this is a challenge that is going to take all of us, is we need to address the root causes of migration. So we need to invest in making sure that people are supported within their communities where they come from, that we work together with other nations to find a solution. And another important one is to establish new economic agreements and gun control measures. So again, people need to be paid, they need to be paid fair for their labor. The US outsourcing labor for it to be cheaper and putting these other mechanisms, it's not something that should be done by our country. And gun control measures, we know that drivers of violence have been because of the exportation of guns from the US. So it's very important if we are really going to make a meaningful change that we do not take these considerations. And that's it for my presentation. Any questions?
And you're telling people or educating them about their rights.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, are you finding under this current administration and the climate that people are more afraid, they feel unsafe? I mean, how are you helping them with their emotions and feelings? And
So yeah, as I mentioned, we have those human rights centers throughout the Texas border, and tomorrow we have a new one. So people, the fear is real. The fear that our communities are experiencing is real. It's happening, and there is a reason why. Um, we try to use this education, and this come all the information we share comes directly from the Constitution. We're not making anything now, we're not giving them any, complex information. It's simply that one, you have the Fourth Amendment, you have the right for your home, your person, and your documents to be free from unreasonable searches without a warrant. You have the Fifth Amendment, the right to remain silent, to not answer questions that the officer might be asking you. And the Sixth Amendment, the right to a fair process, the right to go before a judge and present your case, the right to have a lawyer, the right to not sign anything you don't understand. That is the information we're giving. It's very clear, very straightforward. And we do believe that by people knowing their rights and by them engaging in this, defense, that if the time comes when they need to use them, that they will. And again, this is no longer, I want to say, this is no longer just about migrants, immigrants, border residents. This is about protecting our Constitution and the rights that we all have in this country. Because if we don't protect them for this sector of our communities, what guarantees us that the next day they're not gonna come for us and that they're not gonna take them away from everyone? So I hope that answers the question. It has been hard to reach people. It has been hard to engage people in coming out in mobilizing. But what we're doing, what most of our partners like Las Americas, Hope, and all of us are doing is making sure that people feel comfortable and feel educated enough to participate. And this begins with just simply knowing your rights. Yes.
So has the Border Patrol come to your, the border
Mhm.
hearings for, your workshop areas? To stand outside like they've been doing with schools and whatever?
So we haven't seen a like Border Patrol actively showing up like in churches or in schools, in community centers. We haven't seen it like widely. We had some instances where we have seen them around. And obviously all of us are always kind of watching and make sure that there's communication of what's happening. Um, Again, a lot of us in a lot of our agencies, we work directly with Border Patrol, like Annunciation House, Las Americas, we work directly with them. We don't recognize, at least as an organization, we don't think of a law enforcement as the enemy. They are also part of the solution. They need to be engaged in the conversations with having. They also need to be, brought to the table. They need, their experience and their input matters in this discussion to find a comprehensive way to move forward. Um, and again, we used to have a very close relationship with them. They used to come to our Know Your Rights sessions and tell people about their rights. They used to do the presentations. Um, so again, the fact that whatever decision was taken and to break that communication, it erodes the trust that our community had in them because we had built trust within that system. It erodes our, we are working to continue to make our community safe, to making sure that we are all thinking comprehensively of how to address these issues. So we always, call for a line of communication with all agencies. We do document law enforcement abuse. So we, we are respectful and everything, but we will show and we will document and present how your agency is interacting with the community. And there needs to be accountability and there needs to be oversight, and we'll work towards that. So again, it's a, they pull, we pull back and push. But it's all of us understanding that we work collectively in this.
Thank you.